Richard Drax.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I refer to the registered member's interest? It's a pleasure to contribute to the budget debate. Before I talk about a few specific issues, I promised a constituent, a victim of the infected blood scandal, that I would raise the question of compensation if it wasn't mentioned in the budget speech. As far as I'm aware, it wasn't, so I asked the front bench to let my constituent know in the wind-ups when compensation will be paid. Recommendations were made 10 months ago, as I understand it, for this to happen, and my constituent and I, and I'm sure many others, would be grateful for an answer. When it comes to the budget, it comes to a pretty pass, I regretfully say, when a Conservative government has to plunder the opposition's policies in a budget. I'm talking about scrapping the non-dom tax status and extending the windfall tax on oil and gas companies. The latter, Madam Deputy Speaker, is especially nonsensical for a number of reasons, not least because we want to reduce our reliance on foreign imports. The tax amounts, if I'm correct, to about 70%. And which company is going to bid for a licence when it's simply punished for providing the country's energy? All this when only today the government has announced is to build new gas power stations in order to keep the lights on. Net zero is an admirable aim, but it risks impoverishing the country. What we need is a pragmatic approach to the change. And while talking about the country's essential requirements, there was no more money for our stretched and depleted armed forces. There was a whisper, Madam Deputy Speaker, that defence spending might rise to 2.5% of GDP, if and when that was possible. But that's simply not good enough when we live in such dangerous times. And I wish we'd stop plucking spending targets out of thin air. Let our three services, as I've said before, work out what we need to support and, if necessary, fight with NATO. Cost it, and then decide what we can afford. The Chancellor's key rabbit was a further reduction in national insurance, which has not endeared pensioners who don't pay the tax. Although, as my honourable friend, the member of North West Norfolk, said, they do still have the triple lock, which is generous. Instead, pensioners risk paying more tax on income as the threshold on which the higher rate of tax is paid is frozen. And freezing thresholds is, in effect, a stealth tax. Now, according to the OBR, which the government refers to on many occasions, that would see millions of new taxpayers as their income rises above £12,570 a year. Nearly 3 million workers being dragged into the higher rate of 40%, and 600,000 taxpayers paying the additional rate of 45% as their income passes £125,140 a year. This is hardly Conservative doctrine, Madam Deputy Speaker. When I heard the Chancellor speak of the importance of lower taxes and allowing people to keep more of their own hard-earned money, I was expecting a bombshell of an announcement during his speech. For example, abolishing inheritance tax, lowering income tax, which I would have personally chosen myself, not national insurance, lowering corporation tax to encourage growth, simplifying the tax system, less state, less regulation, reforming business rates, curbing many of these bloated quangos, if not scrapping them altogether, and returning control to elected ministers. With our party staring down the barrel of a gun, it was time to be bold and courageous, Madam Deputy Speaker. I totally accept that the Chancellor is dealing with unprecedented times, disease, wars, a vast debt, and an increasingly unstable world, no doubt all played a part in his very cautious approach. But where have we made the savings? Why do we think, like the opposition benches, that the state has all the answers? The key to a successful economy and growth is a thriving private sector whose taxes pay for the public sector. The more bloated the latter, the more punitive the government has to be on the wealth creators, the risk takers, the innovators, and our very future. This budget has its good points, but they tinker at the edges. Even the small reduction in property capital gains tax and the tiny rise in the VAT registration threshold will neither ignite the property market nor boost small and medium-sized businesses. After 14 years in this place, I find it remarkable that Labour is sitting there quietly on its spending priorities. I ask the question why, and I fear because if they win the election, they will simply endorse ours. What we needed was crystal clear blue water from this budget, Madam Deputy Speaker. Instead, we're pursuing the socialist way. Punish those who earn more by working hard for their families, all to pay for a big estate that is both unaffordable and which runs contrary to every single Conservative value.
Lillian Greenwood.